Good morning, Remco. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Perhaps actually if we could start with a brief introduction to yourself and where exactly IMC fits into.
IMC is one of the world's largest electronic market making firms. We have about 550 people worldwide in offices around the globe, and we make markets on about 50 plus exchanges around the world in most of the exchange traded asset classes.
So clearly someone in your position is going to be extremely interested in regulatory changes, particularly in FX at the moment.
Well, yes, I think that we come at it from a different angle, obviously, because we're, in the context of the financial industry, a relatively small organization, and along with our types of industry members, we're particularly interested, obviously, in the FX market. But I think we come from the angle that we like probably to see the FX market evolve in a market where barriers to entries are lower, there is more price transparency and things like that. And regulations to some extent would help with that.
But are you finding that there are some problems? Because one of the big talking points here was that essentially regulations are starting to get rather too politicized.
Well, I think that you always see that, and you have a different regulatory framework in Europe as you have in the United States. So in the United States, where you have the SEC, CFTC, who are really implementing most of the regulations, whereas in Europe you see quite a lot of detail really being decided on a political level, and so you do see a more politicized climate, but quite rightly so, because I guess the financial industry has got a lot to answer for, and you would therefore have a more political climate. But I do think that the panel discussion did talk about this, is that the regulations probably will in some years from now settle down and turn out to be actually not quite favorable for the marketplace. So I think that what we read, the headlines that we read now, probably don't justify the eventual outcome.
Absolutely, and this is what I was going to ask. Do you think one of the problems that we have is that the public see what is written by the press, which is ultimately going to be a very simplified view of what the real market picture is?
Yeah.
So there's a general sway by the public as to what the public would like to see happen.
Yeah.
And therefore the politicians need to cater to that in order to win votes, even though they know that they shouldn't really be going down that line. So you end up in this situation where they have to create a whole set of reforms to please the public to get in, and then once they're in, they have to go through a whole round of reversing on that in order to make it fit what really is going to work in market structure.
Well, yeah, or I think that to some extent you see political decisions and then regulators who are more obviously in tune with how markets function and are more concerned about maintaining these markets than implementing these regulations in a way that is workable for people. So that's typically, I think, that process. But I think that the type of headline grabbing regulations, I think there are some of those which are clearly, I think, a misrepresentation of what is actually going to happen. It's, for example, the financial transaction tax being a very good example of that. That would effectively, it's being brought as taking money out of the pockets of the banks and giving it to the people in the street, whereas it's actually probably the reverse. And I think that the way it's being presented is obviously sounds well from a political perspective. But then you have regulations, I think, around LIBOR. There was some discussion right now as well, which I think make a lot of sense, and also cater to headlines at the same time.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with us, Remco, and of course enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.